Hello friends, we are here today in Luke chapter 16. So this one's kind of difficult. I don't know if you've read it already, but there's a pericope, there's a passage here, a parable, that at first glance you might look at it and say, what's going on here? I don't understand the point of what Jesus is trying to say here. So I did a little research and I'm getting some conflicting views. And I must say that these are the best chapters. The ones where Jesus is saying something and he's communicating to you and he doesn't spell it out. It means that he wants you to look at it and figure it out yourself. You know, there's truths in here from the God and creator of the entire world. So he wanted us to know this. Now, this is my interpretation, but if you disagree, that's great. You know, look into it. See what it says to you. So, I will say that there seems to be a theme in this chapter, and it has to do with loving money. In the middle of the chapter, he talks about that. No, it says, you know, and then he spoke to the Pharisees, who were kind of obsessed with money. And, you know, Jesus kind of speaks directly to them. So this chapter is kind of like the major theme of this chapter is how to use your money in light of, you know, belonging to a different kingdom that's not of this world. So it begins with this story of this guy who's a manager. He manages the wealth of a very rich ruler. The ruler says, "You're mismanaging my accounts. Why don't you go around and get an account of everything that's going on so that I can give it to my next manager?" And so this guy says, "Okay, I'll do that." And so he goes up to all the people that he has an account with his manager, and he says, "Okay, how much do you owe my manager?" And one says, "Oh, I owe him, you know, 100 gallons of oil." And he's like, "All right, write down 50 gallons of oil." And he goes to the next person. He says, "Well, I owe him this much of this good." And he says, "Well, why don't you cut it in half?" And when it came time for him to give the account of how much everybody owed him, the manager says, well played. You know, he knows that what he's presenting him is less than what he's been given. However, there's nothing he can do about it. He doesn't know the accounts. You know, this is the account that he's been given, and he sees what the person has done, and he looks at him and he goes, well played. You know, there's nothing I can do about this, but what he has secured for himself is friendships, relationships. He has secured a future where he can survive. And, you know, his other prospects were not looking good. It said that he, you know, he wasn't strong enough to dig and he was too proud to beg. And so he's like, yeah, you know, this is what I can do. I can cheat the system a little bit. And the manager says, yeah, well played. And then Jesus, telling the story, is saying, you know, the people of this world are more shrewd than the people of light. Because, now I should say that I think Jesus is making 2 points with this. And the first one, I'll say that he's just saying, yeah, well played. Within the system that you've been given, you know, where people cheat people to get what you need for yourself, he said this was shrewd, this was good, this was well played within the game that you were given. My brother was a robotics coach for a while, and my brother's a good engineer. You know, he's an engineering teacher, and so he does pretty good. Oh my goodness, this tree. So he does pretty good. But I think where my brother excels, I don't know if I've ever told him this before, but where my brother excels as a robotics team coach, high school robotics team coach, is that he likes looking at the strategy of the game, and he's really good at that. So he could say, okay, we need to build a robot, and his team didn't usually get the funding that other teams in the area had, and so it was sometimes a little bit more difficult for them to get the best robot. However, they always knew how to play the game, because he would be like, okay, we can spend this much resources working toward doing this in the game, but every year they would change the game. And so some years it would be, they're shooting balls in a hole, and some years it would be they've got these triangles and they have to put them at certain places, and sometimes it was boxes. The objects always changed, and the game always changed, and the points always changed. And so there was one year that that the way to win was to just leave everything alone, and if your robot could get up on this platform at the end, if all of your people got up on the platform, you could win the game every time. It was a poorly planned game that year, but they knew the system and they knew how to play it. So, with the system of this world, you get more money and you have more money. That's it. You do what you can to get ahead in this world, and then you die. But in light of the fact that there's a world to come, in light of the fact that there's eternal life that people can have, you can look at what you have here, and it changes the game, is essentially what he's saying. Our game is no longer, get rich and get wealth. Our game is, use whatever you can do to not just get to heaven, but to make it so that others can have a relationship with God as well. Now, I think it's interesting, and another point that I think Jesus is commending this man for is that he invested not so much in money, but in friendships. He wasn't going to have money after he lost his job, but he would have these people. And so Jesus is commending him for that as well. He's saying, yes, invest not in more wealth, but in relationships. So when I think of how I can apply this to me, I can just look at the game. I won't tell you what to do, but if you look at it like the game is different, then you have to say, okay, what do I do? What do I do to ensure that I am being a good manager to God? Because we really are managers of this capital that he has given us. And our capital is not money, though it's partially money. It's interesting, there's a part in the chapter where Jesus says, what you do with this ungodly money. He's not talking about money that you've gotten through, some sort of crookery or some sort of, nefarious ways. He's talking about money, just money in general. He's saying, this wicked money that we have, in this world, if you are good with that, then God is going to give you, like real wealth, real godly wealth, and you're gonna have people to share it with. So when we look at this, we can say this capital that we've been given, this godly capital, is that God has given us knowledge. He's given us a wealth of understanding, of spiritual sight, so that we can go around and tell others about what we see and what God has revealed to us. Now, he goes throughout the chapter, and at the end, it comes to the story of the rich man and Lazarus. So I'll just go through it really quick. I've spoken a lot about this chapter already, but there's the rich man, and he is basically spending all of his capital on himself, and he's not giving anything to the poor, not even this man who lives across the street from him, and is begging. And so the man, Lazarus, he goes to heaven, and there he's in comfort. There's this switch in the end. Now I feel like Jesus is still talking to the Pharisees here. He's saying, there's this rich man, and he's saying it's them, and he's saying, they're not giving any of they're stingy. And what I think the point of this last story is what I was just saying, really, is that we've been given this capital of knowledge. And so the rich man says, Father Abraham, send Lazarus to put his finger, wet his finger and put it on my tongue, because I'm in agony here in this pit. And God says, no, there's a divide, there's a chasm between you. And he says, well, why don't you tell my brothers so that they don't end up like this? And he says, they already have Moses and the prophets. Now this, I think, is amazing, because Jesus is talking about himself. How are they going to get out of this chasm? Jesus is the only way to salvation. That's clear all throughout Scripture. And so he's saying, in the Scriptures, we have Moses and the prophets. That means we have, the first 5 books, the Torah, that's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. But we also have the prophets, and all of these books are prophesying about Jesus. All of these books foreshadow, they show that Jesus is the Messiah. And they say, well, if someone raises from the dead, then they'll believe him. And he says, no. He says, if they were not convinced by Moses and the prophets, neither are they going to be convinced if someone raises from the dead. Now, I think this is amazing, because I think for the most part it's true. The people that believed in Jesus before he rose from the dead were also the same people that believed in Jesus after he rose from the dead. And I'm sure that Jesus raising from the dead did convince some people, but the people that their eyes were already spiritually closed to Jesus after he rose from the dead, I don't think they changed very much. So Jesus is foretelling his death again, but he's doing it in a clever way. Now, I think that a main point that's just spelled out in this chapter, if you could leave with one thing, it is that you cannot serve both God and money. You'll either despise God and go for the money, or you can love God and just use the money to worship him. So that's something that's very convicting to me. I don't think I realize this in my life enough, but we need to use what we have, our wicked money and the knowledge that we've been given through God, to serve him. So I'll leave it at that. That is Luke chapter 16. Have a great day.